Hi, this is Greg Goernert of Goernert Wealth Management, and this is my Insights and Perspectives podcast. Welcome to the May 15th episode of my Insights and Perspectives podcast. In this episode, I will be joined by Sommelier and Chef de Cuisine, Tim Ellison. If you can go back in time and talk to Tim Ellison when you first started this journey, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I would say, Tim,
now in this episode, I'm beginning a new business toolkit segment where I'll have some experts share their expertise with us. Today's segment is called Everything You Wanted to Know About Wine, but Were Afraid to Ask. I think you'll like it. My guest today is the Director of Operations at the Pacific Institute of Culinary Arts. He also has the distinction of being the only certified Chef de Cuisine and Sommelier that also holds the prestigious London-based WSET diploma of wines and spirits in Canada. He's appeared on the Food Network, on NBC's The Today Show, as well as in numerous radio and magazine interviews. Welcome, Tim Ellison.
Thanks, Greg.
Can you tell me just a little bit about where you started? How did you become a chef, a sommelier, and what got you so passionate about what you do?
I love that because these days, in the years of celebrity chef, passion and your what fires you to become a chef is a really big important thing of it. I've been in the business now 45 years, and people say, what got you into the industry? Well, in my day, when you were looking for a job, you either got a paper route or you were a dishwasher. And my brother had a paper route. I used to help him 6 days a week and collecting. I said, no way. And I got a job as a dishwasher and discovered a place where it didn't rain in Vancouver, and it was full of food and liquor, not necessarily in that order. And it was really quite an enticing place for me to work. After working in the business, I got bitten by the bug, and 45 years later, here I am.
Okay, so you've been a teenager, so you did the paper route. I remember doing the paper route with the collecting thing. So you started off as, well, I won't say dish pig, but...
yeah, that's what they called us.
So you started...
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah.
So you started up, so you went to bus, or did you work in the back of the house or front of the house?
Yeah, I made the progression all the way through. So when I was washing dishes, the idea was you want to get a job, you want to make some money, you get a job, what are your skill set? You can wash dishes, that's all you're able to do as a young person. Started doing that and discovered dishwashing is a pretty brutal, hard, thankless job. I always thought the pot washer had it pretty good. So I watched the pot washer. One day the pot washer didn't show up, so I said to the chef, I'll do the pot washer's job and my job, but when you replace someone, replace the dishwasher. Did the pot washer job, discovered that was no better, but I thought the fry cook had it easy. One day the fry cook doesn't show up, so I say to the chef, I'll do the fry cook's job and wash pots, but when you hire someone, hire a pot washer because I want to be the fry cook. And then just evolved, and I worked my way up from line cook to chef de cuisine, and then I discovered in the 80s that all of the guests were in the dining room. So I really wanted to be more impactful as a restaurateur, and in order to do that, I needed to kind of move to the front of the house. So went out, started bussing tables, worked as a waiter, dining room manager, and eventually food and beverage director, owned a couple of my own restaurants, and the rest is history. Here I am now.
Wow. So let's just get it back to wine, because that's being a sommelier. A lot of people, and myself included, wine is a fascinating subject, but sometimes I think it can be a bit intimidating. So, can maybe you help us demystify? We often hear phrases like legs, the nose, the body. Maybe can you walk through what those terms mean? And if you're a business owner and you're trying to, show a client a good time and to walk through a nice wine, what should they be looking at?
Yeah, for sure. Really, at the end of the day, sommeliers have made a living out of making wine intimidating, and that's how we stay employed. But the fact of the matter is that it's just the fermented juice of the grape. And it's meant to be enjoyed, and it's meant to be shared with people. And when people are looking at wine and looking at wine lists, and they want to make intelligent comments about it, the thing is, if you can divide white and reds, there are certain elements that are consistent throughout all of wines, whether regardless of color or origin. And it's the clarity of a wine. So if someone's looking at a wine and it's jewel bright, crystal clear in the glass, that's usually something that you can comment on. And then depth of color and intensity. White wines are usually lemon or lemon green or lemon gold, and red wines are ruby garnet, that kind of thing. And the color is an indication of grape variety, region of origin, or age. It's could be worth commenting on the vibrancy of the color, and I think that is something that people can react to, because some wines jump out of the glass jewel bright, and some are a little bit more restrained. And when you see a really bright, fresh, crisp wine, it's usually an indicator of some kind of quality. For things with legs and tears, you simply swirl the liquid around the glass, you watch the wine sheet off the glass, and if it moves very slowly, it's an indicator of either high alcohol or high sugar, or a combination of both. And it usually indicates wines that are a little bit more viscous, rich, full-bodied on the palate, so will have more weight and probably more intensity, and maybe even a little bit more complexity. On the nose, how much does the smell jump out of the glass? Is it very pronounced, or is it a very light intensity on the nose, and do you have to go right to the glass to smell it? And then a couple of comments on fruit and flowers or any other vegetal spice notes that you pick up are very interesting. And just relax and say what comes to mind. People are always really keyed up in trying to find the exact right descriptor, but your impressions are your impressions, and they're completely valid, even if you don't necessarily agree with people all the way around the table. Yeah, if you're drinking red wine and you say you get something like lemon zest, that might not be appropriate. If you're drinking red wine and you say you get a white fruit character, that might not be appropriate. For the most part, your impressions are valid. So I would smell the wine and comment on the vibrancy of the aromas and bouquet, and any kind of primary aromas or bouquets that you experience. When it comes to the palate, richness, the viscosity or the body of the wine is worth a comment. What you taste is worth a comment. And for me, it's always about length and elegance, complexity. Are there a lot of things going on in the mouth, or is it a very simple wine? Do the positive flavors last a long time, or does it finish very quickly? And is it vibrant? Is there a lot of stuff going on in the glass? These are the kind of things that will strike conversation. And asking people to relate the flavors that they are tasting to any other wines that they've ever had, or trying to relate the wine to any travels or trips that they've had, gets people talking about themselves and their own experiences.
Oh, interesting. So if you're planning an evening, and I do lots of evenings, what tips, you've seen lots of things go right. You've seen, I'm sure, lots of things go wrong. If you're hosting an evening or entertaining, what kind of tips can you offer to make something special, or to make the evening success? Maybe some tips on serving wine, or how to do it, when to do it, what kind of wine to do it with, how not to do it wrong. That's always good.
For sure. Well, with wine service, number one, investment in quality glassware, I think, is a easy step that people can do right up front. Companies like Spiegelau and Riedel have varietally specific glasses, and they don't have to be hand-blown crystal and costing you $150 a stem. You can get a quality glass for the $10 to $15 each mark. When people have a quality wine in their glass, it's just like putting a beautiful frame around a piece of artwork. It enhances what's inside. And then when you're picking the wines to go in the glass, I think that for me, it's the company that is the most important thing, and it's always nice to have a couple of talking points around the wine. So if you're inviting guests and you know that they love Italian food, or they travel extensively through Italy, you might want to pick some benchmark wines from Italy, like maybe a Barolo from Piedmont, or an Amarone from Veneto, or Brunello di Montalcino from Tuscany. And these are things that people know and can relate to, and it will spur conversation, and people may be more inclined to share their own personal experiences, and you get to know them on a more of a personal level. If you're able to find special vintages, and if it's a special occasion, you can get a wine from someone's birth year, or the year they joined the company, or some other important milestone in their lives or your shared lives professionally. It also gives you a talking point that you can relate back to those things. Another thing about service temperature is, most people just keep their red wines on the counter and keep their white wines in the fridge. Well, there's no white wine that has been meant to serve as cold as 4 degrees Celsius. When you cool a wine down, what happens is the fruit kind of folds away and the acid comes out. So the coldest white wines we serve are sparkling wines and sweet wines, and we want sweet wines cold so the acidity balances sugar. We want sparkling wines cold because that's what they're all about. They're about the freshness and the brightness and the enjoyment of that. No one buys champagne, pours it in a decanter, lets it go flat, and drinks it for the quality of the wine. It's the bubbles and the crispness that really captures attention. So we serve those at the absolute coldest, and that's 8 degrees Celsius. Celsius. For a light white, you can move it up to around 10 degrees Celsius. And for a richer oak-aged Chardonnay or something that is very interesting, it's got a lot of winemaking in it, serve that wine slightly warmer at about 12 to 14 degrees. And that requires you to take the white wines out of the fridge prior to service, and then don't take your beautiful Montrachet or Meursault and jam it in an ice bucket. You close it down and you lose all that amazing richness. So service of white wines at the correct temperature is a real key piece to making the wine show its best. For red wines, same thing. When they described room temperature, this is days before central heating, so when they mean room temperature, it's not your room in your condo in Yaletown, it's the room in your castle in northern Germany. So we're talking 16 to 18 degrees. No one keeps their rooms at that temperature. So red wines, because you want to lift the acidity but still show the fruit, you still want a little bit of chill. When you touch a red wine bottle, it should be slightly colder than your hand. So it's totally appropriate to pop a red wine in the fridge for 5, 10, or 15 minutes to get a little bit of chill on before you serve it, and you'll find that they will show much better. Prepare your glasses the day before. Make sure they're clean and lint-free. Have decanters ready, not only for red wines, which is a natural to put a red wine decanter. It's a very elegant serving vessel. But if you want to blow your friends away and you've got an incredible Corton Charlemagne or one of these premium white Burgundies or a really important oak Chardonnay from Napa or Sonoma Carneros in California, or even the Checkmate wines that are available in British Columbia. You take those concentrated Chardonnay wines with a lot of winemaking, lees contact, malolactic fermentation, barrel age, you put them in a decanter and serve whites out of the decanter. That little bit of oxygen, because oxygen is a highly reactive gas, and it really makes wines come alive. That little bit of oxygen on those big whites will make them explode, and even the most sophisticated wine drinker is not seeing that commonly, and it'll be a big talking point for them. Wow, you decant your whites? Wow, that's so cool. Why do you do that? And then you talk about how they open up. Always good to have a little bit of food. And you know what? In food and wine pairing, this is what I say to people. Like what you drink what you like. And if you like the food and you like the wine, chances are things are going to go well together. So have some bites so people can have some food available, some bread cubes and things like that to absorb the alcohol so they're able to enjoy the wine without risking, becoming overly intoxicated because they've got food in their belly, and that will absorb some of the alcohol. And the more of that kind of stuff, if you've got some platters of food ready to go, if your decanters are ready to go, if your glasses are ready to go, and you've got the wines at the appropriate temperature, the service and enjoyment of wine is a very easy thing. And when people entertain, the most important thing is people come to your house or your business to visit you. And it's about creating a relationship. And the wine should, or the food should, enhance that activity. It shouldn't be the star of the show. So certainly it is valuable and it validates talking points, but the more stuff that you can get out of the way and the more details you can coordinate before people come over, the better you're able to enjoy the wine, to talk about it, and not be stressed out about running around looking after the details. So the more stuff you can do ahead of time, the better off you will always be.
Interesting. So you mentioned decanting. How long do you decant?
Oh, wow, that's an amazing question because it all really depends. For me, let's clear the easy one right out of the way. And if we're talking like you're going to decant a white wine, you're going to give that a go. I strongly suggest you do that. They don't need much time in contact with oxygen. You decant them 10, 15 minutes before service. They're still going to have adequate chill. It's going to give the oxygen enough time to react. When it comes to red wines, this is a completely different thing. So red wines, oxygen is used to soften youthful wines, and the decantation process is helpful for that, and that's what we call a splash decant. So you take a young, tannic or vigorous wine like a Brunello or a Barolo, a Vino Nobile, or even a youthful Cabernet Sauvignon from Bordeaux or the New World for that matter, and if it's 2 or 3 years, chances are it's not going to throw any sediment, but it's still going to be pretty tightly wound. There's a danger of it being really assertive in terms of its tannins. Soften the tannins, just take that bottle and glug it in a decanter, splash it in there. If you have one of those aeration devices, then there are very many different types. Employ it, and by injecting that oxygen in the wine, you'll soften it and make it more accessible. That happens as soon as you pour it. So if those wines are going through an aerator and they're going into the decanter, probably a half an hour to an hour is plenty of time. If you have a really high-end wine and something that you care a lot about, and you don't want to run it through something as I don't want to use the word vulgar, but as manipulative as an aeration device, then you might want to slowly get in that decanter, and it can sit in that decanter for an hour or two. For very vigorous wines, and I think of Bondi Sante's Chianti Classico, they recommend decanting 36 hours in advance of service. That's excessive and really not the kind of thing that most people can anticipate it and plan for, especially in commercial food service and restaurants. So, the bigger the wine, couple hours will do it. The only caveat is if you have an older wine and a more delicate wine, sometimes they come out guns a-blazing but can fade very quickly. So, for instance, in December of last year, we were fortunate enough to enjoy with some friends a 1918 Coste Esternelle, which, of course, being an older wine, had sediment, required decantation. But because of its age, I knew that once the oxygen got to it, it wasn't going to last forever. So I decanted it, and we consumed that wine within about 45 minutes of the decantation. For decanting for sediment, if it's an older wine, it's going to throw some sediment. You're going to need to remove the liquid from the sediment in infused wines. They're usually 45 minutes, an hour in a decanter, will reward the drinker.
Interesting. So just taking a step back now, like say on my first topic of, just trying to look like you know what you're doing, but say you want to bring a nice bottle of wine to a party, dinner party. Where do you even start with that?
Well, for me, I'm always careful when I bring a nice bottle of wine to a party, like as a hostess gift or something like that. If it's a dinner and I'm bringing wine, chances are good that the host has already selected wine to go with the meal.
Yeah.
So the bottle you bring will become a gift and you will not get to enjoy it. You can say, hey, I brought this and thought that you might like to open it and share it with your guests. But, that's a bit of a crapshoot. If you're intending for wines to be served with the meal, it's always good to find out what's being served. So you can, at least if it's going to be roast beef, show up with a red wine. If it's going to be fried scallop, show up with white wine. Also consider the people that are there and the kind of wines that they drink. And hopefully you will have known these individuals or hung around with them a little bit or gone to lunch or dinner with them and get an idea of the kind of things that they like to drink and guide your selection, whether it be New World, Old World, light wines, full-bodied wines, oaked wines, stainless steel wines, that kind of thing, and bring something that will be pleasing to them. My favorite thing to do, rather than go out and spend big bucks and get a trophy wine, is to find a wine in that kind of $20 to $30 mark that really hits above its weight, something that's super cool, and it might be highly rated, and you discovered it through reading in wine journals, or you might get turned on to it by a friend or a sommelier, and show up with a wine that is accessible, exciting, but presents great value, because that is what really gets people talking, and it makes them remember your visit.
Well, that brings me, another question I was going to ask you, because with wine, I think we can be spoiled for choice. You can go out and it's overwhelming what's
Absolutely.
out there at the wine store. So how would you go about narrowing it down?
For wine choice?
Yeah.
Well, right away, start white or red. People have their preference. From there, Old World, New World. Some people like the restraint and the elegance of an Old World wine, a wine that doesn't give everything up in the first sip, and you got to go to the glass again and again to kind of suss out the nuances and the subtleties, and they evolve and change over time. New World wines, very powerful, very forward, often that they are really accessible for a large cross-section of wine enjoyers. So the New World is not a bad place to go. And then for myself, I think, if I'm going to go white wine, red wine, Old World, New World, then I think, what have I had that's exciting and new? So, for instance, in the New World, I'm seeing wines from Uruguay that are very enjoyable, wines from Bolivia that are starting to show up in the market in Brazil, cool new places like that, because that creates some excitement, talking points. You show up with a Albarino or a Tannat Merlot from Uruguay, you go, hey, I've brought this wine, it's from Uruguay. People right away are kind of like, wow, that's interesting. They'll be probably more inclined to open it because they're super curious to try it right there. And then when it's delicious, like the Bodegas Garzon wines, they're blown away that, you've actually been able to turn them on to completely something new. I love that. The other thing that I always look for is wines that give more quality or hit above their weight, as we say in the industry. And there are many, many wines. Like I think about Chilean Sauvignon Blancs. Sauvignon Blanc has really been a grape variety that's captured the imagination of the world. And when the New Zealanders introduced them in the 80s and early 90s, they were selling in the low teens. $20 was the most you'd pay for something like Cloudy Bay. Now, $40, $50, no problem. So Sauvignon Blanc is a great varietal, turns people on, but they're starting to get a little bit kind of less excited about the prices that are being charged. But if you can say, hey, you like Sauvignon Blanc, try this Chilean Sauvignon Blanc. And the Chilean Sauvignon Blancs are so inexpensive, people look at them and go, oh, these must be crappy quality because they're only $13, $14. But they drink like $30 New Zealand Sauv Blancs. So that's really exciting. Or if you go into an old world area like Entre-deux-Mers and Bordeaux, where the Bordelais have been working with Sauvignon Blanc for years, mixing with Semillon, putting it in barrels, and making kind of flat, lifeless wines that never really captured anybody's imagination. Now they are looking at the success of the New World and the New Zealanders, and the Bordelais are putting Sauv Blanc in stainless steel, 100%. It's more expensive because it's Bordeaux, but it's Bordeaux. And with that brings a little bit more prestige. And these wines are delicious, Greg. And when you can turn someone on to a stainless steel, 100% Sauv from Bordeaux that is made by a reputable house, that is the kind of thing that really excites people. And you find the same thing in the red wine genre as well. You know, some beautiful high-value Syrahs and Grenaches coming from the Languedoc, southern France. I'm really excited about eastern Spain and the regions of Éclat, Humila, and Alamansa, the Monastrell grape known as Mourvèdre in southern France. Exciting wines that are not expensive but deliver tremendous drinking pleasure for the dollar. I love to show up with that kind of neat stuff. And then classics like sherry or German Riesling that people know all about but don't necessarily order or reach for. You show up with something like that, it captures their imagination. And I have to tell you, sommeliers are doing everything we can in the world to get people drinking more Mosel Riesling. German Rieslings, lower in alcohol, perfectly appropriate for people that want to consume wine as a social beverage and are concerned about intoxication, or, dare I say, of an age. Like I'm in my 50s now, so I don't go out and drink the powerful high-alcohol wines or seek them out like I used to. I drink wine more for enjoyment, and I'm not as interested in the alcoholic buds. These wines are incredible. They're bright, they're fresh, they're interesting, low alcohol, completely appropriate for social occasions. And everybody knows about German Riesling, but who's drinking it? Everybody knows about sherry. Who's drinking it? And if you can get these products like Fino sherry in someone's glass with some warm olives, they try the sherry, they're like, oh, they try the warm olive, they're like, oh, that's nice. They try the sherry again, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they rediscover a classic.
Now,
it's
walk
great.
me back through that for sherry, because when I think sherry, and my mind goes back to my grandmother's house.
Harvey's Bristol Cream.
That's the one, yeah. So
the sherry your grandma drank. It's a constant saying. My grandma drank it too. Yeah, and the thing about sherry, the Palomino grape and the winemaking. This is a wine that has centuries of history, and its reputation was kind of ruined in the 60s and 70s by Harvey's, because what they did is they took a beautiful Amontillado, they took the sweetest sherry of them all, which is made by a grape called Pedro Jimenez, and they put PX or Pedro Jimenez in with Amontillado sherry. So you had this nutty brown sherry that was very sweet, kind of lifeless, cloying, and a bit dead. But when you take and you're making sherry from Palomino, before it gets to that sweetening process, for a Fino sherry, when the floor forms, it's protected from oxidation. It has this incredible kind of nutty flavor, ice cold with warm olives or warm nuts or traditional Spanish tapas. It's super exciting, really, really great for the summer months. And the thing is, because no one drinks sherry, the market's depressed, the value is insane, and you can get quality Manzanillos or Finos for $20 to $30. You start to go into the ones, and what happens when they make sherry, they put it in a barrel called a pot, and if they fill it about 2/3 and they leave the airspace in there, and if floor this, it's kind of like a mold, a yeasty mold that forms on the top. It looks like cotton candy and it floats on the wine, protects it from air. If that forms, that's Fino. If that doesn't form, then the oxygen attacks the wine. It starts to brown like a apple or a potato does when you cut. This is where Amontillado and Olorosos those come from. And they are more of a nutty, richer kind of flavor. Fascinating wines, delicious as digestives, work with a variety of foods, and can be very, very interesting. And Amontilleros and Olorosos left in the barrel for 30 years, being sold in 375 ml bottles in the British Columbia market for $30. Find a 30-year-old wine that you can get for under 50. The value is insane. And with sherry, it's all about the application. And even when you go all the way to the end and you have these very, very sweet sherries, the ones that are made with Pedro Jimenez, you have them at the end of the meal with rich dark chocolate or nutty kind of Christmas cake desserts. You pour those wines for people, and it is mind-blowing for them, the depth, the elegance, the concentration, the length in them. These wines have been sitting in front of our face for years, and no one drinks them because, just like you said, all we remember is this sweet, sticky, sickly sherry that our grandmas drank, and we're just turned off by it. But the sherry is a really exciting category.
Interesting. Now, you've come and joined me and you've actually co-hosted with me when I do my walk around the world with Wine Economic Outlook. Now, you bring along some amazing wines, and you have some great stories behind them, which I always think is the best part. Maybe can you share with us some of your favorite new wines that you're seeing?
Oh, wow. Well, I've mentioned a few of them.
Yeah.
Right now, I have to say Bodegas Garzón out of Uruguay. They're doing a white wine made with Albarino grape, which finds its home in northern Portugal and Galicias in western Spain. Really exciting around that $30 mark. That one's really, like Uruguayan wines, these Albarinos are super, super exciting. In Australia, the Australians have a long history of making wine, and they kind of ruined it in the 90s and the early 2000s with these, what we call in the trade, these critter wines, big, blowy, alcoholic, really extracted wines that were for serious kind of drinking. But if you go into Victoria, which is a state in the south east part of the country, in around areas like Mornington Peninsula, you're getting Chardonnays from that neck of the woods that aren't your over-oaked extracted Chard that you would expect from Australia, but they're very elegant and delicate, almost Burgundian-like. As well, just inland in an area called Heathcote, they're making Shiraz, Aussie Shiraz. But it's striking me more as like a Northern Rhone kind of Syrah, a Côte Rôtie, or a Hermitage. The drinking pleasure and the value from that part is really exciting. I'm stoked on the wines of Tasmania, Chardonnays and the Pinot Noirs, and the sparkling wines coming out of that area. And one of the areas that's really caught my imagination, I'm super excited about, is South Africa. For years and years, South Africa had, because of the political climate, no access to technology or expertise, great material. And in the last 20 or 30 years, with the change in the climate there's been a lot of heavy investment. And we are seeing from producers like Anthony Rupert some very compelling Cabernet Sauvignons. The Chenin's are way improved in quality. And Syrah, Shiraz, Chardonnays are world-class, and I think because they're only just getting their foothold in the market, there's still great values to be had in South Africa. I'm a big fan of the Med, and when I talk about the Med, I talk about countries like Israel and Lebanon. And the Israelis have a long history of grape going back to the 50s with heavy investments from the Rothschilds, and that now is starting to take root and really give promise. Lebanon, Chateau Moussar, the late Serge Hojar's winery, been around for decades and decades, and his wines and the Chateau Moussar label, really the amazing thing, they age forever, and the young ones have this kind of complexity, but as they get older, the fruit and the generosity that they give is really cool. The other area, not really well represented in North America in terms of selection, but that also has a very, very long history of grape growing. Greece, the Xinomavras, the Mavrodaphnes, Assyrtiko, these are very exciting grape varieties. And for my daily drinkers, Southern Italy, for the reds, Aglianico, Nero Primitivo, great value, great drinking wine. And for the whites, Italian whites, Falanghina, Fiano, and coming from the north, things like Cortese from Gave, Soave, Garganica. This is a wine that, we've seen Soave our whole lives, just like Grandma's Sherry, but the care and attention being put in it from producers like Pure Pan is really exciting. And so those are some of the wines that, are really capturing my imagination right now.
So what's the worst mistake that you see people making when it comes to wine?
There's two things that happen. Yeah. Well, more than two, but the one thing is I see people have it in their mind that somehow old wine is better than new wine. And, there's a lot of compelling reasons to drink old wine, and it gives very interesting drinking pleasure. The wines develop because they're living in the bottle. It can be quite exciting. But old wines tend to have more tertiary characteristics, more kind of earthy, grounded, animal leather nuances, more cooked fruit, and they don't have the freshness and the vibrancy. And what happens is people see these older wines and they pay a fortune for them because they're naturally more expensive because of their rarity and the fact that there's the economic cost of holding inventory back. And it's not to their liking. And they think, because this has got to be 30 or 40 years old, I'm going to love it. And I've opened bottles, 50, 60 years old for people, and they're surprised. They're disappointed. So it don't just go for an old vintage. You have to love older wine if you're going to make that kind of investment. And if you like fresh, fruity, floral, vibrant wines, then stay with younger vintages. So don't get sucked in to thinking just because it's old, it's going to be the most amazing thing you've ever had. The other thing I see happen is there's a correlation or an idea in people's mind that there's some kind of correlation between price and quality. So they figure if they order from the right side of the menu, which we call, shopping from the price side of the menu, and if they order the most expensive wine, it's somehow going to be the best. But that's not necessarily the case. And what ends up happening is people move outside of their comfort zone in terms of budget. They get this expensive wine, they drink it, and it's not really exciting or compelling for them. And all they can think about is what they've spent on it, and it erodes the quality. So have a budget in mind. Whatever you're comfortable with, because trust me, there's the sommelier or a clerk in a wine store who is going to be able to help you find a compelling and exciting wine at the price that you're comfortable with. And I tell you, whether that's $15 or $500 or $5,000, they all exist at every price range. And before you start going with ancient wines or older wines, make sure that that's the kind of profile that you enjoy. And if you like younger wines and 3 to 5 years old, stick with that in that kind of age category because you're going to get more of that vibrant, fresh fruit. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, especially in the restaurant scene, is that they feel that they must have the right pairing. And they'll be swayed by sommeliers and waiters who will guide them towards wine types that may be more appropriate for the type of dish they're eating, but are not wines that they enjoy. And what ends up happening is you hate Cabernet Sauvignon, but you're having this roast beef, and you ask for a Pinot Noir, and the sommelier convinces you that Pinot's too light, and you got to go for the richer Cab. You go for the Cab, you drink the wine, you go, I hate this wine. I wish I was drinking Pinot Noir. Trust yourself. Drink what you like, and don't be swayed. And I always tell people, your personal preference and what thrills you is the most important thing to me. If I think that as a sommelier or wine professional, you're going down a road headed for disaster, I will try to find a varietal that will have attributes or will echo the qualities of the wines that you like that I think are more appropriate, that may create a better match. But really, the most important thing is to put wine in your glass that you love. And if you're eating food you like, you're drinking wine you like, everything is going to work out in the end. Trust me.
Perfect. Now, I got one last question before we stop here, but I'd like to ask this to everybody. If you can go back in time and talk to Tim Ellison when you first started this journey, what's the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
I would say, Tim, you need to travel more. I think that there's a big world out there and there's a lot to be experienced. I'm a born and raised Vancouverite, and I'm looking out the window of your offices here in the Canaccord Tower downtown, and I have to tell you that there's a reason I live here. This is the most beautiful city I've been in the world. Even though I've traveled, I've yet to go anywhere where I go, oh my God, I'd rather live here than Vancouver. However, as a young person, you must force yourself, leave your comfort zone, experience the world, travel, have have exposure to different cultures, for different approaches to life. So then when you do come back, it would be so much more rich. And what I did as a young man is I put my head down, I started restaurants, I worked hard, I built my career, and I did it all here in this town. And as I travel now, because of course, the success that I've achieved in business has allowed me that freedom, I see that there's a big world out there. And I think, 25-year-old Tim would have had a pretty good time. 55-year-old Tim does okay, but he goes to bed early.
Well, that's great advice. And I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. This has been incredibly informative. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rick. My pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on my website at greggoernert.com, which is greggoernert.com. Thanks again.